Like, why is Russia attacking Ukraine? Okay, so I've been up for like 14 hours now streaming. I've been up for longer than that, but I've been streaming for 14 hours, so I'll try to give the simple version. Russia's official stance is that they are claiming that the Ukrainian government is a fascist government that has been funding neo-Nazi militias to commit genocide in eastern Ukraine. That is not true. This is the culmination of an effort ever since 2013, 2014, started with the annexation of Crimea, to control Ukraine politics and prevent them from turning to the favor of the West, specifically around the expansion of NATO. The coup in 2013 deposed a Russian-friendly government. And then organized the coming to power of a pro-Western government, and Russia feels threatened by the expansion of NATO. There are Nazis, but that is not why. This is a proxy war with West. What I was saying is that is the official reason. That doesn't mean that is the real reason, but that is the official reason that is given in like press releases. The official casus belli, if you will. But yes, that is not why. Especially since the Ukrainian government is not a fascist government. There are Nazis in Ukraine, but there are Nazis in Germany. There are Nazis in Poland. There are Nazis in France. Sadly, there are Nazis everywhere. There's a difference between their... But yeah, anyways. Now, in addition to the NATO thing, to the fact that Russia has that is a long-standing effort to control Ukraine to prevent it from being able to join NATO and align itself directly against Russia and expand NATO bases to Russian borders. It's also there's an ideological thing with Putin. Bullshit. I agree with Bolshevik on that. Putin has expressed interest in seeing Russia as a nation state ideologically. That aligns with historical borders, with the idea of ethnic lines. That's where like the annexation of Crimea can also be seen as justified, etc., etc. Ukraine is also in several ways a very rich country. It's a bit of a breadbasket agriculturally, a huge source of food for Europe and Africa. Many very valuable resources, and finally, I think it's also important in two ways concerning concerning Russian politics. Internally, a war is good for ratings. A war is good for Putin's popularity. 50% of Russians support the war. 25% of them are undecided, and only 25% are opposed to it, according to a poll we looked up earlier. But also externally, think about what ways Russia has to exert influence on the world. It has its own strategic reserves, gas and oil. But there's only so far that can go, especially when it's not the only source of those resources. It's not true about war support in Russia. Well, it's an article I saw. If that's not true, if you have another source, I'll check it out. But that was the article I saw earlier. Russia has only one economic venue to express influence, which is through its oil and gas. It could have others potentially, but right now economically that's not what's happening with Russia. And then it's got this military. But the problem is when you start exerting your influence through your military, well, at some point, if negotiations break down, then you got to escalate. And that's kind of the position Russia is in. Russia was not able to obtain the concessions they wanted in negotiations. Which were basically centered around NATO backing away from Eastern Europe and the Baltic states. And yeah, this is where we are now. It's now forced posturing on both sides. No one wins. It's more than posturing. I would not call an actual war posturing. What was happening before the war was posturing, but now it's war. That being said, it's just war, It's war between Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine is not a NATO member. In fact, NATO has expressly stated it will not intervene militarily in Ukraine, and Russia has also expressly stated that if NATO intervenes, that would mean World War III. No one wants that. It's not going to happen. What is going to happen is more sanctions on Russia, reinforcement of NATO bases in actual NATO allies in Europe. Oh yeah, and also supporting Ukraine defense through supplies and logistics, but not through actual military deployments. Man, thank God Taiwan, China, and US are all rich, and they can all just play it out with economic soft power than having to play the hard power hand like Russia does. Yeah. I have family there, and I'm honestly worried. Yeah, I would be worried too. It's fucking scary. This is happening inside Kiev. Uh-oh. Is this going to be something where Russia gets part of Ukraine, like the eastern part? If Russia wins, Russia's win condition is to depose the Ukrainian government. Once they prop up a pro-Russian government in place of the pro-Western government, that pro-Russian government will, number one, acknowledge the border with Crimea and the annexation of Crimea. So the borders, the Ukrainian borders will change definitely at that point. Crimean border will be recognized, and the independence of the Luhansk and the Donbas regions also will be recognized. Then they will do the same modus operandi that happened with Crimea. There will be referendums in Donbas and Luhansk, and the referendums will be like 90-95% pro-annexation, and then they'll be annexed by Russia. So if I was an idiot and didn't know many of those words, Ukraine is trying to have some influence on Russia, and Russia said, heck no. No. If you want to say it in a simple term, in simple words, Ukraine wanted to side with the West, and Russia said, heck no. Ukraine wanted to become like a NATO EU ally member, and Russia was like, fuck no. You're my backyard, buddy. I don't know how much is true. The letter Z, which is not in Russian as azbuka, means zashchita, so in English, protection. I don't know if that's true. French Finance Minister Le Maire, the option of cutting off Russia from SWIFT remains on the table. It is the last resort option. That's what Biden was saying as well. Or another version, Zahvata, that means occupation. But was it Ukraine that wanted that, or behind the scenes, for example, US NATO wanting to get closer to Russia? My understanding is that Ukraine, ever since the fall of the USSR, that Ukraine has been basically a playground of influence between the West and Russia. Pre the Maidan coup in 2013, it was a pro-Russian government propped up by Russian influence. Post the coup, it was a pro-Western government propped up by US like backdoor dealings. That being said, even though historically NATO is an anti-Russian alliance, anti-USSR alliance, post-USSR, there have been efforts to make NATO inclusive of Russia that have completely fallen apart. It has not succeeded, and now NATO is once again an anti-Russian alliance, amongst other things. But it's still a defensive alliance as well. That's why NATO cannot intervene in Ukraine. Does the Russian equipment look old, or is it just me? Yes, it's old equipment.
Like an octopus to suffocate and pull apart.
It's Soviet-era equipment. Thanks for the follow, Life on Part-Time. So the pro-Russian government got couped, Russia got mad and annexed 2 parts of Ukraine, right? Yeah, if you want to skip like basically almost 10 years of stuff, yeah.